Okay, part two of Jonathan Fibonacci's documentary on gender rights. So here you go. We're going to get to this in just a second. Beautiful Durango, Colorado. Holy shit. Not every town is perfect. You know what? And Durango isn't either. I mean, I always refer to Durango, Colorado as the beautiful Durango because there is a Durango, New Mexico. So we're going to talk about this in a second, how all cops are pieces of shit, but really they're just, they're just monkeys. I mean, they're just monkeys in suits. That's all they are. They're just real people. I believe personally, if you want to go all Pareto principle, that 80% of police are good people. I mean, these are just solid people. I mean, these are people that you want to have a drink with. I don't, because they're cops, but I'm more of a fireman guy. I like firemen. I'm kind of one of those guys that just thinks firemen are better. And cops are pieces of shit. And then there's Ferguson cops, and then there's, Durango cops. Durango cops are just bad. There's Ferguson cops that are just terrible. And so in this documentary, I want to kind of really be honest with the good and the bad of a town that I love, a place that I call paradise. Boom, see what I did there? Beautiful paradise. So here you go. In this documentary of gender studies, I want to be clear that, I love Durango. And as a photographer, lots of just great stuff. In fact, I went to the game yesterday. Fortunately, it didn't work out for them when they played Erie. But, this is a town that I wish I would have grown up in. And, I grew up in Duncan, Oklahoma. So I'm from Oklahoma. So when I see these mountains and I experience this nature, I'm sincere. Hopefully you'll hear the sincerity in my voice when I say I love Durango. But I'm also doing a documentary on gender studies from Manna Mountain. You're like, holy shit, Manna Mountain? What's going on with this guy? Well, that's its own story of how Jonathan Fibonacci went from a $200,000 a year business to homeless, or as I like to call it, Raven. Because, homelessness is, as I've said in another video, homelessness is just a linguistic word that we put on a lot of problems that we don't know how to face. Like, for example, sometimes when cities don't know how to solve unemployment, they just say, well, it's homeless. So the good, bad, and the ugly, beautiful Durango, Colorado paradise. Holy shit, we got to go talk about cops. And is Colleen a cunt? So here you go. I know I'm a comic and kind of a newbie documentary guy, but there are some things that piss me off, and this stuff kind of pisses me off. And in this gender studies documentary, the point is that women are now at a place of privilege, and all this, and how feminism is the new Marxism, and how Marxism is really going from a narrative that all men are predators or a paycheck. I want to show in the documentary of how women live in a privileged society while simultaneously talking about the needs or their need for more and more rights. So back in the day, women used to want equality. Now they want privilege. Sometimes they go cunt. So Colleen went cunt. Here I'm at the library, and I brought my Red Ritchie bike in because the cops will not enforce laws that protect men. So I've called the Durango police a couple times. I'm like, hey, I think my bike's been stolen. They're like, sorry, we don't get involved in civil matters. I'm like, it's not a civil matter. It's a criminal offense. And for example, I was working at Palmer Hotel here in town, a good hotel. Palmer Hotel is a great hotel. It's run by 22-year-olds. So what happens when you have a bunch of 22-year-old females running Palmer Hotel? Well, it's run like shit. I worked there for 3 days. Palmer didn't want to pay me. And so instead of paying me, they just hit me with a trespassing charge so that I couldn't pick up my last check. It took me about a week to get my last check. And they still have my property. And I'm still calling the Durango police saying, all right, Durango police, do your job for our fucking Raven. And then the Durango police told me, a man, sorry, dude, we do not help men get their property back. It's a civil matter. I'm like, it's not a civil matter. The Palmer Hotel stole my shit. They're like, sorry, dude, it's a civil matter. So I'll show you a lot of examples of here, even in Durango, where men will not get their custody rights enforced. Our property could be stolen. It's called a civil matter. In fact, here on Manna Mountain, there was literally a stabbing. And instead of protecting the ravens of Manna Mountain, the Durango police called that incident literally a stabbing. They called it a mutual duel. So, kind of with that in mind, I walked into this woman's house. Of course, that's how she looks. That's her attitude. Colleen went cunt. She's telling me to get my Red Richie out of the foyer or whatever it's called, the atrium. I said, well, it's a service dog. Everybody has a service dog. I have one too. And she said the weirdest thing to me. She was like, well, we'll allow ponies, but we won't allow a bike. I'm like, you'll allow a fucking pony in the fucking library, but not a bike? And I'm only bringing the bike in there because I don't want to lose it, because I don't have the money for a lock. So she's like, well, if it was a pony, you could bring it in as a service dog. I'm like, holy shit, the world of service dogs is overplayed. Of course, she didn't like that. I said, and then I challenged her. I said, so if I brought a pony in here and it shit on the fucking, and at that point, she's like, well, I'll call the cops. I'm like, well, call the fucking cops. And she did. And they hit me with the trespassing charge. And it was more of a protest. And I wasn't really going there to protest. I was going there to just say, hey, really to use the library for what ravens use the library for. Looking for jobs. That's how I search for employment. Everybody wants to tell ravens, go get a job. Where do you think we go? We go to the library. And Durango has an amazing library. And Durango actually does a lot for the homeless community in terms of the library system. But in terms of helping these stupid bastards, they're really, in many ways, a threat to homelessness and a threat to ravens. Because remember, in Durango, every time a raven goes to jail, the city of Durango gets $58 a night. You're like, what's your point, John Fibonacci? You documentarian for gender rights, First Amendment, nigga? I said, well, here you go. When you start thinking in terms of Los Angeles and Detroit, Washington, Oklahoma City, Miami, think of the private prison system and how what cities are doing is they're just putting poor people in jail. Well, who are those poor people? Who are those beautiful ravens, those incarnate Jesus Christ people? Well, they're ravens. They're minorities. They're blacks. Who's filling these private prisons? And it's happening because these guys really, at the end of the day, don't protect men. They don't serve men. They don't serve and protect men. They serve and protect women. And feminism, who paints men as predators every 28 seconds. So here you go, real life example. So I said, call the fucking cops. They hit me with the trespassing charge. Of course, I went talked to the judge, and I was denied a jury trial. And I was talking about federally protected statuses and how federally protected statuses are relevant. Because remember, gender is a federally protected status. Gender is a federally protected status, and men are a gender. Gender applies to men. And a lot of times when people think of gender rights, they instantly think of feminism. They instantly think of the needs of feminine equality. Well, let's talk about equality. Well, she barred me from the library for a week. Now, did that help my homelessness or hurt my homelessness? It hurt my homelessness. So where in the world is there a precedent that a female can kick a man out of a public space? Think about that. A female can kick a man out of a public space for a week, 2 weeks, 6 months. Here at Manna Mountain, I've been kicked out of Manna Soup Kitchen for having these opinions. Well, at Manna Soup Kitchen, they kicked me out for 6 months because there's a cunt there too. And while I'm pointing to this cunt, I'm saying, at the end of the day, these guys who are good people need to do their job and when they protect men's rights and men's property, and when they tell these people, listen, this is a public space, you can't kick them out. You go up to Manna Mountain, a soup kitchen, tell Kathy the First Amendment still applies to ravens. Who's having that discussion? And we need to have that discussion. And these are beautiful people wearing these fucking monkey suits responding to every female call. And this is just read Ritchie in the library. Can you imagine what men go through in their civil cases where they're awarded court-ordered visitation and they never get that visitation? Of course, when they try to get the cops to enforce that visitation, they're told it's a civil matter. In Texas, which is one of the worst